My name is Brian O'Toole. I think I recognize a lot of people here. It's wonderful to see people again. Usually, the last time I would have talked at a conference like this, I was probably wearing a suit and in a different role. I don't wear suits anymore because I put on 30 kilos over the pandemic and none of them fit me. So, what I'm going to talk about today is the security in 5G networks, the regulations, trust, and paradox, and how some of the things that we are trying to do are making us less secure and what we need to do to fix that. Emil, you are going to hate every bit of this presentation. I'm super sorry, but anyway, we will see. We will start a conversation at the very least. So, unrelated to my presentation, I just want to feel out the room with something and ask a simple question that most of you are going to get wrong. Nearly everyone. Um, do you trust me? Everyone, put their hand up who trusts me. Liars. All of you. Now, we've got about 5 or 6 people here who say and are willing to say that they trust me. Uh, let me reframe this question because again, I'm trying to think about my future career when I get fired from Ericsson, which will be any day now. You wouldn't buy a car off me. You don't trust me enough to buy a car, right? I wouldn't be a good secondhand car salesman. You probably don't trust me with your bank details. You don't trust me with your, the secrets that you might tell your partner or whoever else. So yeah, that's fine. You've made that clear to me now. It's a little bit hard inside. Let me change this question a bit. Who's got a mobile phone? Yeah, anyone who doesn't have a mobile phone or a mobile phone on say 3G, which we don't use anymore. No, no one. Okay, let me reframe this question then. Who trusts me with your secrets? Right? Every one of you have used one of our products in the last 60 seconds. You didn't know about it. You didn't agree to it necessarily that you're going to work with us, but you are. All of your information goes over our systems. Now, we of course want you to trust me specifically, Ericsson in general, also the vendors that you might be dealing with, who we call Telia, Telenor. I'll get them all wrong if I keep on going through them. There's hundreds, and probably some people here in the room work for them. Um, this desire for, on my side, for me to be trusted and for you to trust your vendors is pushing us into really weird places when we talk about what we do. And we're trying to maybe live in a way where everything can be done quicker. We can get everything to be driven, super fast. But at the same time, we still want to see that feeling of trust in our vendors and what we do. And we're maybe focusing a little bit on the wrong areas. And I want to try and show what that is and talk about that and maybe start a bit of a conversation about it. So this is a slide that we use internally in Ericsson and externally indeed, as I'm now presenting it here. And what we say is for a network to be secure, you need a million things. And when I talk about a network, I mean a telecommunications network. But you can think of any sort of network. It doesn't even have to be like TCP/IP. Think of Emil's last presentation, which was super, and the fortress picture in particular. That's sort of, you're putting together a picture of like a network of defenses or layered defenses that you might have, as Matt's pointed out, that you need all of these different interconnecting nodes to work together and do things here. In our case, when we talk about a network, of course, what we mean is usually a countrywide network that several million or several hundred million people will connect to and use for their data and phone calls and so on and so forth. So we need all of these things, right, to really show that you have a secure network, right? If you don't have all of these things, or if you don't have the majority of these things, you can't do it. Now, when you, and I'm going to point out to all the room, when you're selecting your vendors, when you're picking what you want, when you're going out and you're choosing, I don't want to like point out Omega Point or other people here because it's not going to reflect very well on the vendors. But say you're choosing Ericsson or you're choosing another vendor, a Cisco or someone like this, who you will in effect trust with really sensitive information. And it could be Apple, it could be Google, it can be anyone else. You people here and me and everyone, we tend to focus in just on one area, right? Oh, we just look at one part of this. We take a snapshot at time and we say, yeah, you know what? That organization at that time got ISO 27001 certified, which is a snapshot of them doing this. Or you might look and see that you've got a Q mark or something. I don't know what you call it in Sweden, but like a quality mark that you might have on a device, or an IoT certification, or in Ericsson's case, what's called a NISA certification. Now, governments are starting to regulate this, which I think it's good that governments are getting involved, and I think it's good that there is regulation in the space, especially in national critical infrastructure. We can't get away from this, that there is a national interest in a government, and any government around the world, forcing an organization and a private entity to create secure hardware and software. But again, if you have the picture that you're not taking into consideration everything, and you're not taking it in continuously, you're going to end up in a situation where a vendor like me will just give you a snapshot showing that everything is secure. Does this make sense? Does anyone disagree with what I'm saying so far? No one's thrown any coffee cups or anything at this point, which is surprising because I see at least two of my ex-direct reports here who I think want to throw things at me usually anyway. So if we take it from here then, the problem that we now have with snapshots, and again, Emil, I point to you. You said you'd achieved your ISO 27000 certification, right? Or you're on it. But a lot of people here have done certifications and done things. What's the quickest anyone has done it from start to finish, roughly? Anyone? Okay, I'll do it this way. Anyone done it in a day? No, right? Oh, one. You did from start to finish in a day. Okay, well, all right. We've got one. That's good. That's pretty impressive. Hands up who took a week. Hands up who it took a month. Hands up who it took 6 months. Right, more. Hands up who it took a year. Right, more again, and so on and so forth. For us, for our products, for a single product, it takes about 6 weeks for us to get certified by a government agency or by a private agency. And that's what we think we can do at the very fastest to do this. My problem is I've got a release cycle every 2 weeks. And now, another question, who here likes to keep their systems updated with patches? Right? That's a depressingly low number of hands going up. Maybe we should change this. I've got a presentation on patch management, why that's important. No, but patch management is super important. And again, if we look back at my last slide, we talk about the deployment and operations and all these things that you have to have things there. And even with an assume breach concept or a zero trust concept, you still need to make sure that you're keeping your systems up to date, right? But now, if you're forced by regulation to only run systems that are certified, who here wants to wait, say, 8 weeks for a patch for a critical vulnerability? Right? No one. And at the minute, for me, that's about I think the fastest we can get them out is about 60 days when we're going through the whole process and deploying it into a network, because it is so complex to get through a lot of the regulatory hurdles. Again, I'm not arguing against regulation. I think regulation is a really good thing. But we have to be cognizant that 8 weeks, which is fast for us in the telco world, we're a little bit slower than everyone else. But that 8 weeks is a huge window of opportunity for attackers to come in. And it is a sort of false timeline. We're not working for those 8 weeks. We're sending in applications. We're waiting for responses. We're doing reviews with auditors. We're doing these other things. So it is putting us in a little bit of a weird situation. And that's what I was sort of saying there at the beginning about there's a paradox here, right? You all want to trust me. And part of the way that you want to, well, whether you say it out loud that you do really want to trust me, you know in your heart you do. I'm a trustworthy guy. But you also, and the way that you're trying to trust me is through the sort of mode of you want to hold a piece of paper, you want to see a Q mark, you want to see some sort of attestation, or you want to perform the attestation yourself. You want to get into my networks and see my stuff and see that I'm doing all the things that I'm meant to be doing, or at least all the things that I'm telling you that I'm doing. All these things take time to do. At the same time, you want to see things happen super fast, right? You don't want to wait 8 weeks to get a patch for Log4j, for instance, or Spring for Shell, or whatever the latest trendy sort of vulnerability is. Most of the top 10 vulnerabilities, by the way, are not from the last 2 years. I think we still have ones from 2008 on the top 10 list, right, that people are still exploiting. So, that's a different problem. But again, maybe the question is, how much speed are we as a society willing to sacrifice? Meaning, how much increased risk are we willing to accept um, to have this sort of feeling of trust? Or are there different models that we could look at for trust, instead of necessarily saying, okay, every time I give you a piece of hardware, you get a Q mark on it, or you get a certification or a stamp? And again, maybe another question for the group here: how many people are still buying hardware? Like, what proportion of your say infrastructure purchases are hardware, and what proportion is cloud or software? Right? I think very few people are having trucks turning up to their office full of switches or whatever. It might be hard disks in the back, right? We're all just getting our credit card and going onto some portal somewhere and purchasing it that way, right? It's the same for us, same for everyone else. So the thought that you will be able to get a Q mark, or you'll be able to do these things, is not necessarily there. The other thing is, again, maybe this is very telco specific, but nobody in our line of work has the same network, right? I don't know how it is in small, medium enterprises, but I don't think everyone's network looks the same. I think everyone's got different needs, everyone's got different wants, everyone's got different things. And usually in the enterprise space, you see that represented by, you purchase different things, you get licenses. You might want an IDS, or you might want an EDR or something like this that you want to purchase into your network. On our case, we usually get asked to customize for the different bands that might be there, but it's still a customization, still takes time. And again, remembering, if we have to go back to the paradox of us as a society all want the ability to not just have one sort of set network. You want to have things quickly, but you also want us to do sort of 6 weeks of validation and assessment testing. This also drives cost. One of the things I asked, or I was thinking when you all said that you didn't trust me, was that I wouldn't borrow any money off anyone. But of course, no one's borrowing any money off anyone at the minute, because the interest rates are super high. And anything that adds cost to any sort of area of our lives at the minute is really being scrutinized and really being looked at. So how do we still sort of achieve this trustworthy solution that gives you the element of trust in me, so that you do trust me with your details about your banking? You do trust me when you're buying a car off Blockit or Tradera or whatever, using your mobile phone. You do trust me that when you're sending messages to your loved one or your partner or whoever, that you have that feeling of trust in the infrastructure. I'm not saying that you shouldn't today, by the way. I mean, we do a lot that you get it, but you're right to be cautious. This is very telco specific, but I think it's sort of interesting. We've got two different versions of sort of certification schemes that we're going under at the minute. Does anyone recognize these terms aside from Andreas Blank and Stenschild? No. Okay. So NISAS is a network security assurance scheme, defined by GSMA, and SCAS is a security certification assurance scheme, I think is what they stand for, which is defined by 3GPP. Now, who here in the room is subject to these rules? No, you're all wrong. Everyone put up your hands. These are going to become the foundation of the EU cybersecurity law when it relates to 5G. Well, it's proposed maybe to become foundation of this. We'll see if it actually happens. So everyone here will be complying to these laws and will be subject to these laws, even if you don't know about them. The reason that we put them up, I think, is that the NISAS one at the beginning has a focus on explicitly on looking at your processes, looking at how your organization works, looking at how the people in your organization and your layers of defense work together in a strong network. And in a way, it's sort of close to ISO 27001, but in other ways, it's much narrower and more focused on software development, specifically for telecommunications. SCAS, on the other hand, is the individual product verification. Think of this as crash testing a car, but every car that you want to drive, like every car in the car showroom lot, is crash tested beforehand. That's what this does. We make sure everything goes through everything there. It drives a lot of time. It's much more granular. You get a lot more information out of SCAS, but it also prevents you doing things like patching. Anyone here who's familiar with common criteria or the sort of old Orange book, if you're working with like the US Defense, it's the same sort of thing there, right? You have to go through, what is it, the EAL level certification for this. It's like the telco version of this sort of common criteria light. And what our experience has been with these is that, again, this is a snapshot. I can give you something that on Tuesday was super secure, and you can be really happy knowing that I spent the 8 weeks preceding Tuesday doing this. Or I can give you this certification and say, hey, this is how we work in general. You should trust me all the time. Make sense? Obvious question you might be asking, Brian, why don't you do both, right? That could be a thing there. And you say, then I get best of both worlds. The problem is it's still the 8 week sort of thing that brings it there. It's not saying that NISAS is perfect. We do have a proposal within Ericsson that we've gone to the European Union with to try and say, okay, within the EU law, we'd like people to start thinking about security in this way. So rather than you take an uncertified product, you do a load of testing anyway to launch it, then you spend 8 weeks auditing it, and then you do this, and then a patch comes out, and you go back to the beginning, and you go back here, and you go through here, and you go through here. By the way, this process for us costs 95 MSEK, so it's not cheap, just the process. So that's another reason why we hate it. Or what we want to start seeing, and what we want to sort of propose within Europe, is that we say instead, certify against our continuous testing. We should open our books to everyone. And I say we as an industry, I don't just mean Ericsson. We should open our books towards everyone. We should have the auditors come in and look at the nuts and bolts of what we're doing, closer to a like SSAE type audit where you have this sort of continuous control monitoring, except instead of it just being for 6 months, it's continuous. And then every product that comes out of here, we can say, actually, you can trust this. Now, we're a long way from doing this. And part of the reason we're a long way from doing this is, again, I asked at the beginning, who's got a mobile phone? The phone is sort of tangible. You can hold it in your hand. And I think a lot of the conversations that we have, we like to think things are simple. We like to think, oh yeah, I can get a stamp on this. I can get a stamp on an IoT device. I can get a stamp on a network router. When we start talking about a customized, individualized network across a country side scope, or even across a say large enterprise going through many sites like a airport or a factory or a supermarket, it starts becoming really difficult to get someone to come in and give a stamp who will have the requisite technical knowledge to do this. That was sort of what I wanted to just present. Again, I don't have any conclusions, unfortunately, for people here. I just want to highlight that there's a problem, and it's coming for us first, but ye all need to be ready. Thank you.
Good. And guess what? I got my notes.
Oh, wonderful.
So you talked about trust me.
Mm.
Was there a question mark or not?
Oh,
That's
there
a good question.
Certainly was.
Regulation for critical infrastructure. You talked about focus on small pieces, snapshots, something you touched there. You mentioned one thing, you never spoke about it, but it was on the screen. Shift left. Follow new methodologies.
Yes.
What is your take on that?
It's a good question. Again, if I think about the way that we do it, as I mentioned before, we launch a product for some of our units every 2 weeks. That's our release cycle. And within that, under the traditional methodologies that we follow, it takes about 135 hours to do all the documentation required. Within a 2-week scope, 135 hours is really significant in a team. You really notice the impact there. So one of the big successes we've had is by moving everything to sort of before that 2-week scope. We prevent people from even being able to do things that would require documentation in the future. It gets a little bit complicated into the sort of methodologies that we're following, but basically speaking, we've taken 19 commercial tools. Qualys is here, right? Yeah. So pointing at Qualys, they're one of the tools that we sort of have looked at in this, and but similar sort of tools, and everyone would be familiar. The anchors, trivias, tenables, Qualys, and moved it sort of closer to where the developers on the keyboards are actually sitting, and then doing that shift left and being able to show that we do it consistently, it's enforced, is a way that we're trying to help. Again, the regulators trust us that we're doing the things. If someone asks, they want to see the output from, say, our Qualis scan, for instance, we have it front and center. So
good. I'm just mentioning it because developing a SaaS solution that I did last year, shift left is one of the themes that needs to follow into how you do stuff. You have to do it. Then I have paradox, sacrifice, speed. And last but not least, NESAs and SCAs, a crash test.
yes, maybe.
And open books for test and certification. That was my takeaway. Did you have anything else? Meanwhile, Mats will come up here and he will talk about digitalization. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So while Mats is coming up here, so